$0 is a brutal starting point, but it is honest. You know exactly where you stand. You are focused. You are motivated. You are not making the mistake that takes down a surprising number of people who have worked hard and saved well. Today we are talking about why hitting $50,000 is genuinely more dangerous than starting from nothing and what to do about it. I'm Max of Monkey Money, and the argument sounds counterintuitive, and it is supposed to. Because the people who need to hear it most are the ones who will immediately push back on it. If you have $50,000 saved or invested right now, stay with me, because what I'm about to describe is not hypothetical. It happens to people at this exact threshold more than at almost any other point in the wealth-building journey. Here is why zero is safer than $50,000 in one very specific way. When you have nothing, your financial behavior is shaped by necessity. Every decision is high stakes. There is no buffer for mistakes, no cushion for complacency, and no capital to lose. That pressure forces clarity. It forces learning. It forces the kind of relentless focus that builds the habits and the knowledge that $50,000 alone cannot buy. When you hit $50,000, something psychologically significant happens. It does not feel like a waypoint. It feels like an arrival. And the moment it feels like an arrival, the behaviors that got you there, the discipline, the frugality, the refusal to waste money, begin to loosen. The first trap at the $50,000 mark is lifestyle creep, and it is by far the most common. $50,000 is a significant number. It is also, depending on your market and your lifestyle, approximately the cost of a car, a home furnishing upgrade, an extended travel experience, or a combination of purchases that individually feel like reasonable rewards. The rationalization writes itself. You worked hard to get here. You deserve to enjoy it. You still have money left. You will save more next time. There is a useful framework for evaluating any major purchase at this level. If you cannot afford to buy the item twice in cash from passive income, not from your savings balance, from the returns that balance generates, the item is consuming capital rather than lifestyle. A $50,000 car bought from a $50,000 balance does not leave you with a car and $50,000. It leaves you with a depreciating asset and zero, and the compounding returns on that $50,000 wiped out in a single purchase. Here is the banana version of this trap, because I think it makes the math more visceral. Imagine you spent 3 years carefully accumulating 100 bananas, a meaningful stash, the first time you have had real abundance. The moment you look at the pile, something shifts. You feel secure. You feel like you have earned the right to stop being so careful. And so you trade 90 of them for a very nice banana display case that depreciates immediately and produces nothing. You are left with 10 bananas and a display case. The compounding that would have happened on those 100 bananas is gone forever. The second trap is the inflation illusion. $50,000 sitting in a traditional savings account is not $50,000 in purchasing power a year from now. It is less. Even in a high-yield savings account earning 4 to 5% in 2026, inflation is quietly doing the opposite work. In years where inflation runs at 3 to 4%, your real return is barely positive. In years where it runs higher, your purchasing power declines despite the interest payments. The danger is not that the number changes. It is that the number stays the same while its value quietly erodes. Watching your balance hold at $50,000 produces a feeling of stability that is not fully accurate. The actual value of that balance is declining in real terms every month. It sits in a cash account without being deployed into something that keeps pace with or outperforms inflation. The fix is not to spend the money. It is to put it to work in a structure where it can compound above inflation. Tax-advantaged investment accounts. Your 401k, your Roth IRA, your HSA are the first destination. Low-cost index funds in a taxable brokerage account for money beyond tax advantage limits are the second. Cash in a savings account should represent your emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of essential expenses, and not a dollar more than that. The third trap is tax inefficiency, and it quietly destroys more wealth at this milestone than most people realize. Interest earned on $50,000 in a savings account is taxed as ordinary income every year it is earned. If you are in the 24% federal tax bracket and your HYSA is paying 4%, your nominal yield is 4%. Your after-tax yield is closer to 3%. In a moderate inflation environment, you are working hard to stay flat. Tax-advantaged accounts eliminate this drag on the money inside them. $50,000 in a Roth IRA grows completely tax-free. $50,000 in a 401k grows tax-deferred. The compounding that happens inside those accounts is not interrupted annually by a tax bill. Over a 20 to 30-year horizon, the difference between tax-advantaged and taxable compounding on $50,000 is not a small rounding error. It is often $30,000 to $80,000, depending on the tax bracket and the time period. If you've made it this far, hit like and subscribe. We really appreciate every single one of you. Now, the fourth trap, and this one is the hardest to see clearly because it is invisible to the person it is affecting. It is the entitlement mindset, the sense that you have done the work, you have earned the milestone, and it is now safe to ease off. Zero requires relentless focus because the consequences of distraction are immediate and severe. $50,000 creates a buffer between you and those consequences, and the buffer is comfortable enough that the urgency starts to fade. The hard work that generated the $50,000 required a specific intensity of focus that is genuinely difficult to sustain indefinitely. The milestone provides psychological permission to reduce that intensity, which feels like balance, but in financial terms is often the beginning of stagnation. The people who build real wealth past $50,000 are not the ones who relax when they get there. They are the ones who recognize the milestone for what it is, a waypoint, not a destination. The fifth trap is specific to business owners and entrepreneurs, and it is arguably the most financially destructive of all. $50,000 in a business account feels like a buffer. It is often the amount at which business owners start making decisions as if the constraint of scarcity has been removed. Upgrading equipment, expanding before the model is proven, hiring before revenue justifies it. The reality of business costs versus projected costs is brutal. Actual expenses in most businesses run approximately 40% higher than initial projections. Revenue in the first year runs 40 to 50% lower than the spreadsheet suggested. A $50,000 cushion built on pre-launch optimism can evaporate within 6 to 9 months of real-world operation. The $50,000 that felt like abundance at the planning stage turns out to be barely enough to survive the gap between projection and reality. The fix is to treat the $50,000 cushion as a minimum survival floor, not a comfortable operating budget, and to keep the same cost discipline in place that built the cushion to begin with. Here is the second banana moment, and it is specifically for anyone who has hit this milestone through business or investment. The amount of attention your pile gets changes when it reaches 50,000. Before that number, you are mostly left alone by your own psychology, by other people, and by the temptation to make bold moves. Once you have a visible stash of 50 bunches of bananas, the jungle changes. Other monkeys have opinions about how you should deploy it. Vendors appear with proposals. Your own brain starts generating ideas about what you could do with it. The danger of the pile is proportional to its visibility, and $50,000 is visible enough to generate pressure from every direction. So what do you actually do when you hit $50,000? First, don't buy anything that consumes principal without generating return. Not the car, not the upgrade, not the thing you have been denying yourself. Not yet. Second, move it into the right accounts. Tax advantaged first. Emergency fund carved out and kept liquid. The rest into a taxable investment account if the tax advantaged limits are already maxed. Third, keep the habits that got you there. The discipline, the tracking, the automation. The milestone does not reward relaxation. It rewards continuation. This is the step most people skip because it requires the least visible action, but it is the one that determines whether the $50,000 becomes $100,000 or disappears back to zero. Continuing the system is unglamorous. It is also the whole thing. Fourth, reframe the milestone. $50,000 is not an arrival. It is the point where the compounding engine starts to become meaningfully productive. It is the beginning of the interesting part, not the end of the hard part. $0 is genuinely difficult, but it is honest about what it requires. $50,000 is comfortable enough to be dangerous, comfortable enough to relax, comfortable enough to take unnecessary risk, comfortable enough to feel like the work is done when the most important work is just beginning. Do not let the milestone convince you it is something it is not. If this video reframed how you think about financial milestones, subscribe to Monkey Money, drop a comment, and tell me which of these traps came closest to home for you. See you next time.